We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone.
We have ignition.
अस्सलामुअलैकुम। हम ज़मीन के रहने वालों की तरफ से आपको खुश आमदीद कहते हैं।
Hola y saludos a todos.
Greetings and friendly wishes to all who may encounter this Voyager and receive this message.
Hello.
We step into the universe with humility and hope.
Children of the planet Earth.
Greetings mga ka-spacers natin out there from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And sa lahat ng ating mga ka-spacers na nakatutok ngayon worldwide and netwide, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat and welcome to this episode of COSMOQUEST, a podcast. So mga ka-spacers, for this episode, we will be focusing on the search for possible members of the solar system capable of supporting life. And if you will recall from our previous episode about the properties of water, mga ka-spacers, life as we know it requires liquid water, an energy source, nutrients, and a habitable zone, which we mentioned in our last episode, mga ka-spacers. So all of these are needed in order for an organism to survive. And also we mentioned in our previous episode that life can withstand extreme conditions. And we mentioned Deinococcus radiodurans, the tardigrades, and some members of the so-called extremophiles, members of kingdom Archaebacteria that are capable of withstanding extreme conditions. Now, what about mga ka-spacers? Life as we don't know it. So, studies of life in extreme environmental conditions on Earth had led us to focus on some prime places to look for possible life beyond planet Earth. So we will be mentioning Mars, Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter, Titan, also one of the moons of Saturn, and Enceladus, also one of the moons of Saturn. So mga ka-spacers, let's take a look now at the possibility of life on the red planet Mars. Now Mars has been of great interest even during the dawn of modern astronomy. In fact, in 1659, Christian Huygens discovered a strange feature on the surface of the red planet Mars through his telescope. And later, we call it Syrtis Major. So here is a drawing made by Christian Huygens on November 28, 1659 of what he saw on the surface of Mars, which we later call as Syrtis Major. So here is a photo of the planet Mars with Syrtis Major. Now also, Giovanni Cassini studied Mars. Now we know for a fact that we associate Cassini with that gap between the A and the B ring of Saturn's rings, which we call as the Cassini division. So we associate Cassini with Saturn. But did you know mga ka-spacers that Giovanni Cassini also studied Mars? So in 1666, Giovanni Cassini observes Mars and determines that the rotational period or the length of one Martian day is 24 hours and 40 minutes. So isn't that fascinating mga ka-spacers? Then mga ka-spacers, another Giovanni came into the picture. And this was Giovanni Schiaparelli. Now, Giovanni Schiaparelli popularized the idea of Martian beings, and public fascination with Martian beings began in the late 19th century when this astronomer in 1877, Giovanni Schiaparelli, reported observations of large canals or yung mga channels on the Martian surface. So these are some of the drawings made by Giovanni Schiaparelli of those canali or canals or channels on the Martian surface. And he thought that those canals were built by Martian beings. So doon na popularize yung konsepto of Martians on the surface of Mars that built those canals. So ito po, this is an artist concept of canal builders on Mars. So sila daw po yung gumawa ng mga canals or channels na nakita ni Giovanni Schiaparelli. So that popularized the idea na may mga Martians nga on the red planet. Now, right after Giovanni Schiaparelli popularized the idea of Martians on the red planet due to his observations of the so-called channels or canals on the Martian surface, Percival Lowell came into the picture. Now, we associate Percival Lowell with Pluto. In fact, Percival Lowell predicted the existence of another heavenly body beyond the orbit of Neptune, which we now call as Pluto, and this was discovered later by Clyde Tombaugh. So, we associate Percival Lowell with Pluto. Where in fact, did you know mga ka-spacers that Percival Lowell also had this fascination of the planet Mars, and he was influenced by the observations of Giovanni Schiaparelli. Percival Lowell founded an observatory with 30 and 45 centimeters, or that's about 12 and 18-inch telescopes in that observatory, and he used those telescopes to study Mars. And in fact, he seriously countenanced the possibility of life on the red planet. And this was described in his book Mars as the Abode of Life in 1910. So that's how fascinated Percival Lowell of the possibility of life on the planet Mars. So mga ka-spacers, that was Percival Lowell, and I hope you would realize how fascinated Percival Lowell was about the existence of Martians on the red planet. And in fact, may I quote from Percival Lowell himself. So sabi niya that Mars is inhabited by beings of some sort, or other we may consider as certain as it is uncertain what these beings may be. Yun ang sinabi ni Percival Lowell. And because of this popularity of Martians on the red planet, it became part of our pop culture. And there are certain cartoon characters that depicted Martians. And ito yung si Marvin the Martian, developed by Warner Brothers. Now, Marvin the Martian was an extraterrestrial character from Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes, and Merry Melodies cartoons. E nung bata ko yan, pinapanood ko yan. So he frequently appear as a villain, no? Para siyang kontrabida dun sa Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies show, yung mga kasama ni Daffy Duck saka ni Porky Pig. Ayan, no? Si Marvin the Martian. Alright, and also may mga radio dramas noon depicting Martians. Now, radio convinced us about the existence of Martians. In fact, in 1938, there was a radio broadcast entitled War of the Worlds. And when this was aired in 1938, it scared millions of listeners into believing that tentacled Martian creatures had landed on Earth in their war machines. And may mga pelikula ito. In fact, yung latest, yung War of the Worlds, ang naging bida dito ay si Tom Cruise. So that's War of the Worlds, mga ka-spacers. Meron pa, may pelikula pa entitled Mars Attacks. So ayan po yung mga characters ng Mars Attacks. And also, Meron pang TV show entitled My Favorite Martian, starring Bill Bixby and Ray Walston. Ayan po. So, My Favorite Martian po, nung bata ako, pinapanood ko pa yan. So, may lumalabas na antena dun sa ulo nung character na yan, yung Martian. Yung maliit na yan, si Bill Bixby yan. Alright. And also, there was a TV show. Ito naman ay mga marionettes entitled Thunderbirds Argo 0X Destination Mars. Ayan po. So, ang mga gumanap dito ay mga marionettes, parang puppet. And also, itong spaceship na to, ang destination niya ay Planet Mars. Then when nakarating sila sa Planet Mars, marami silang nakita ng mga Martian beings na umatake sa kanila. And there was also a movie starred by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Ito yung Total Recall. So again, yung setting niya ay Planet Mars. Okay, and also may mga pelikula din na lumabas about the Planet Mars like Escape from Mars. Ayan, in fact may namatay nga na astronaut dyan bago sila umalis sa Planet Mars. And mga ka-spacers, I'm sure makaka-relate kayo dito sa pelikula na ito. The title of the movie is The Martian. The Martian is a 2015 science fiction film directed by Ridley Scott and starring Matt Damon. I'm sure marami sa inyo dyan ay mga fans ni Matt Damon. So ang ginampanan dito ni Matt Damon ay yung character, yung astronaut na si Mark Watney. So the astronaut Mark Watney was stranded on the planet Mars dito sa movie na ito after his team assumed him dead. So ang ginawa ngayon ni Mark Watney, he must rely on his ingenuity to find a way to signal to Earth na buhay siya and para ma-rescue siya. And while waiting for that rescue, marami siyang ginawa na paraan para mabuhay siya on the red planet. In fact, nagtanim nga siya dito ng mga potatoes, diba? Para ma-extend yung kanyang food supply. So that was the movie The Martian. There's also this movie entitled The Space Between Us. So ang storya na to, there was this character, si Gardner Elliot. Si Gardner Elliot was the first human born on the planet Mars. And nung lumalaki na siya, nagkaroon po siya ng online girlfriend by the name of Tulsa from Colorado. Then talagang na-inlove silang dalawa at gusto ni Gardner Elliot na umuwi sa Earth para makita niya yung kanyang online girlfriend. So dyan pa nag-revolve yung story ng The Space Between Us. And hindi lang sa movies mga ka-spacers, pati sa pagkain pinasok na rin ng Planet Mars. So we have this chocolate bar na pangalan ay Mars. And pinasok na rin ng Mars ang music industry. So meron tayong mga singers na related yung pangalan nila sa Mars, like si Bruno Mars. So that's how fascinated we are about the planet Mars. So mga ka-spacers, ang tanong, why is it that man is so fascinated about the existence of life on the planet Mars? Now, Mars is probably the other planet in the solar system most likely to harbor life. And paano natin nasabi yan? Now, there is geological evidence, abundant geological evidence from spacecraft explorations that Mars once had a thicker atmosphere and possibly liquid water on its surface. Pero ngayon mga ka-spacers, we know that Mars has a thin atmosphere, so mababa yung pressure, and the Martian atmosphere is made up mostly of carbon dioxide, and yung Martian temperature is about -50 degrees Celsius, parang temperature ng Antarctica. So parang napaka-imposible that Mars can support life in those harsh conditions. Pero naniniwala ang mga scientists natin through spacecraft explorations that many millions of years ago Mars had a thicker atmosphere and possibly liquid water. Pero ngayon there's no liquid water yet. Wala pa tayong nakikitang liquid water on the surface of Mars because of the thinness of the Martian atmosphere and the low pressure. Water would simply evaporate. But there is evidence, may mga ebidensya for liquid water that flowed in the past. So marami silang nakita ng mga pictures taken by space probes that visited Mars. Marami silang nakitang mga channels or outflow canals. And these canals may prove that water once flowed on the Martian surface. These canals may have been carved by running water, mga ka-spacers. So, ito yung isang ebidensya na water may have once flowed on the Martian surface. So mga ka-spacers, these are some photos taken by some of the space probes that visited Mars. And this is unlike the Martian canals as perceived by Schiaparelli and Percival Lowell. But these geological features, they resemble dried up riverbeds. So again, many astronomers believed that these geological features may prove that water once flowed on the Martian surface. These canals or dried up river beds or tributaries may have been carved by running water. Now, ang tanong mga ka-spacers, where's the water now on the planet Mars? Now, water on the planet Mars may have been locked in the polar ice caps. Now, the polar ice caps of Mars contain mostly carbon dioxide ice or dry ice, but it may also contain water. So that's the polar ice caps of Mars, and water may be locked in the polar ice caps of Mars. Now let us mention some of the space probes or space missions that visited Mars, and one of them was Viking. The Viking probes of the mid-1970s carried experiments designed to detect microorganisms that may be present in the Martian soil. So that's the mission of the Viking space probes, to detect microorganisms in the Martian soil at their respective landing sites. So the Viking program, mga ka-spacers, found a place in history and became the first US mission to land a spacecraft safely on the surface of Mars and return images of its surface. Two identical spacecraft, each consisting of a lander and an orbiter, were built. Each orbiter-lander pair flew together and entered Mars orbit. The landers then separated and descended to the planet's surface. The Viking 1 lander, mga ka-spacers, touched down on the western slope of Chris Planitia or the Plain of Gold, while Viking 2 landers settled down at Utopia Planitia. Now, besides taking photographs and collecting scientific data on the Martian surface, the two landers conducted 3 biology experiments designed to look for possible signs of life. Each experiment discovered unexpected and enigmatic chemical activity in the Martian soil, but provided no clear evidence for the presence of living microorganisms in the soil near the landing sites. And according to the scientists, mga ka-spacers, Mars itself is self-sterilizing. They believe the combination of solar ultraviolet radiation, that saturates the surface, the extreme dryness of the soil, and the oxidizing nature of the soil chemistry prevented the formation of living organisms in the Martian soil. The Viking mission was planned to continue for 90 days after landing. Each orbiter and lander operated far beyond its design lifetime. So ayan po mga ka-spacer. So that's the Viking mission on the Martian surface. So isn't that fascinating? And they conducted experiments to detect the presence of microorganisms in the Martian soil. So mga ka-spacers, this is a diagram of that sealed test container on board Viking 1 and 2 that carried out experiments in order to look for biosignatures of microbial life on the Martian soil. Again, this was conducted in 1976 when the two Viking landers, Viking 1 and 2, carried out biological experiments to the surface of Mars. The first successful Mars landers, Viking 1 and Viking 2, carried out experiments to look for biosignatures of microbial life on Mars. The landers each use a robotic arm, as you could see in this photo, to pick up and place Martian soil onto those sealed test containers like the one in this photo. This is a diagram of that sealed test container that would detect the presence of biosignatures of microbial life on the Martian soil. So isn't that fascinating mga ka-spacers? But unfortunately, they failed to detect any presence of life on the red planet. Now, even though Viking 1 and 2 failed to detect any signs of life on Mars, pero mga ka-spacers, no, parang the word fail is not appropriate. So sabihin na lang natin that the biological experiments conducted on board Viking 1 and 2 were inconclusive. NASA continues to send space probes onto the red planet to search for possible life. And some of our latest Mars information comes from 5 active probes on or in orbit around Mars, including 3 orbiters and 3 rovers. So this includes Pathfinder, the 2001 Mars Odyssey, Mars Express, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the Sojourner rover, the Opportunity rover, the Curiosity rover, and the latest mga ka-spacers, the Perseverance rover, which is now on the Jezero crater of the planet Mars. So here is the Mars Pathfinder rover Sojourner exploring the Martian surface, and this was featured in the movie The Martian. Then we have the Opportunity Mars rover, then we have the Mars Curiosity rover, and the latest mga ka-spacers is the Perseverance rover on the Jezero crater exploring the Martian surface. Alright mga ka-spacers, now although Mars has the most Earth-like environment of any other planet in the solar system, the surface of Mars is too dry, too cold, and too affected by solar ultraviolet radiation to meet the requirements of habitability. So we continue to search for life on the planet Mars. NASA continues the search for possible life on Mars. So mga ka-spacers, now what about the possibility of life on Europa? Now we know that Europa is the 6th largest moon in the solar system, and it is also Jupiter's 4th largest satellite. Europa is one of the so-called Galilean moons of Jupiter. And Europa has been visited already by several space probes including Voyager and the Galileo space probes. And based from their observations, Europa is covered with water ice. And Europa's surface being made of water ice reflects about 5.5 times the sunlight than our moon does. And many scientists, astrobiologists believe that beneath that solid icy sheet of Europa may contain liquid water. And as we mentioned before in our previous episodes, the search for life outside planet Earth is the search for water. Scientists are almost certain, mga ka-spacers, that hidden beneath the icy surface of Europa is a salty water ocean thought to contain twice as much water as Earth's oceans combined. So isn't that fascinating, mga ka-spacers? So if there is really an ocean beneath that icy sheet, then there might be some microbial life on Europa. And the Hubble Space Telescope in 2013 discovered water vapor venting from the surface of Europa. This discovery that water vapor is ejected near the South Pole is quite significant, because that means that beneath that icy sheet may also contain some sort of energy source. And this strengthens Europa's position as the top candidate for potential habitability. So mga ka-spacers, with this status of Europa as a top candidate for potential habitability, NASA is now planning a mission to Europa in the future with the so-called NASA's Europa Clipper mission. The main objective of NASA's Europa Clipper is to assess Europa's habitability. So Europa Clipper will try to determine if really there is an ocean beneath the icy sheet of Europa. And in future missions, NASA will eventually send a lander on Europa. This lander will drill a hole through that icy sheet, and hopefully if there is liquid beneath that icy sheet, then this lander will send a robotic submarine to assess if there is really life beneath that icy sheet of Europa. So those are some of the future missions to Europa. So isn't that fascinating really, mga ka-spacers? Now, what about the possibility of life on Titan? Now mga ka-spacers, we know that Titan is the largest moon of Saturn. And it is also the second largest natural satellite in the solar system. The largest natural satellite in our solar system is Ganymede, one of the Galilean moons of Jupiter. And mga ka-spacers, did you know that Titan is the only moon in our solar system known to have a dense atmosphere made up mostly of nitrogen? And if you will compare our atmosphere with the atmosphere of Titan, again you will notice that Earth's atmosphere is made up of the following gases. The most abundant gas in our atmosphere is nitrogen, followed by oxygen. Now the atmosphere of Titan is somewhat similar. The most abundant gas in Titan's atmosphere is also nitrogen, followed by other gases such as methane and argon. And did you know, mga ka-spacers, that Titan is the only known object other than the Earth on which clear evidence of stable bodies of surface liquid has been found. In fact, based on the observations made by the Cassini-Huygens probe, Titan has liquid methane. In fact, you have lakes of methane on the surface of Titan. Now mga ka-spacers, now with that notion that Titan's atmosphere is similar to Earth, being nitrogen based, and with that notion that on the surface of Titan you have lakes of methane as discovered by the Cassini-Huygens probe, then there is a possibility that Titan may harbor life. Here on Earth, mga ka-spacers, we have extremophiles microorganisms called methanogens. Methanogens are microorganisms that can withstand extreme concentrations of methane. Now, if there are lakes of methane on Titan, then there must be methanogen-like microorganisms on those methane lakes. So, isn't that fascinating, mga ka-spacers, thinking of that possibility that there might be some methanogen-like microorganisms on those methane lakes of Titan. So mga ka-spacers, the latest mission to Saturn was the Cassini-Huygens mission. Now, the Cassini-Huygens probe reported certain anomalies in the atmosphere near the surface which could be consistent with the presence of methane-producing organisms. So mga ka-spacers, ito po yung sinasabi ko kanina ng mga methanogens. Now, methanogens are extremophiles here on Earth that can withstand very high concentrations of methane. And again, there is a possibility that those anomalies may be due to the presence of those methane-tolerant organisms. But again, those anomalies may be alternatively due to non-living chemical processes or meteorological processes. So there is a new hope for the presence of life on the surface of Titan, and as discovered by the Cassini-Huygens mission, there was a molecule found on Titan. So mga ka-spacers, now what is this molecule discovered on Titan that gives us hope for the existence of possible microbial life on Titan? Now, this molecule is called acrylonitrile, and as you could see there, that's the chemical formula for acrylonitrile. Other names of acrylonitrile includes vinyl cyanide and propenentril, and this molecule was discovered in space in 1975, and there was a definite detection of this molecule on Titan by the Cassini-Huygens probe, and there's an abundance of this molecule on Titan. Now, what is the significance of acrylonitrile? Now, acrylonitrile is a vital component for cell formation, mga ka-spacers. Therefore, its presence is a strong indication that life could well exist in one of the Titan's many methane lakes and seas. So, isn't that fascinating, mga ka-spacers? Now, because of the presence of this molecule on Titan, again, there is a possibility that Titan may harbor microbial life because acrylonitrile is a vital component for cell formation. Now, what about the possibility of life on Enceladus? Now, Enceladus is the 6th largest moon of Saturn. It is about 500 kilometers in diameter, about a tenth of that of Saturn's largest moon, Titan. And as discovered by the Cassini-Huygens probe, Enceladus is mostly covered by fresh, clean ice, making it one of the most reflective bodies of the solar system. So the fact that Enceladus is covered by fresh, clean ice. And just like Europa, beneath that icy sheet of Enceladus may contain liquid water. And the search for life outside planet Earth is the search for water. So there is a great possibility that beneath that icy sheet of Enceladus, just like Europa, may harbor microbial life. So isn't that fascinating, mga ka-spacers? And also in 2005, the Cassini-Huygens spacecraft discovered that icy water particles and gas gush from the moon's surface at approximately 800 miles per hour. So parang geyser, as you could see in this photo taken by the Cassini-Huygens probe. So ano yung implication nito? The mere fact na may mga geysers discovered on Enceladus, this means that there might be some energy source beneath that icy sheet. So parang mga hydrothermal vents. So the presence of liquid water on Enceladus and those hydrothermal vents and complex organic molecules as discovered by the Cassini-Huygens probe make the moon Enceladus potentially habitable for life. So isn't that fascinating really, mga ka-spacers? Well, I guess that's about it for this episode of COSMOQUEST, a podcast. So mga ka-spacers, bilang tulong nyo na rin sa akin and sa mga officers and crew of the Vedan Society of Young Astronomers to please like and share this episode of COSMOQUEST so that we could reach more people, lalong-lalo na po yung mga estudyante, so that they would be inspired to love the sciences, especially astronomy. Please like, share, and follow the Facebook page, the Vedan Society of Young Astronomers. Please like, share, and follow the Facebook page of the Skywatcher Society of Las Piñas. And also mga ka-spacers, please like, share, and follow my Facebook page, the Science Guy Ka-Spacers channel. And don't forget mga ka-spacers to please subscribe also to my YouTube channel, the Science Guy Prof Jun Cajigal. Please click on that notification bell. I-click nyo na po mga ka-spacers bilang tulong nyo na rin po sa akin para magpatuloy yung ating advocacy to share the passion for the sciences, lalong-lalo na yung astronomy. Alright, so maraming salamat sa mga tumutok ngayon sa episode na ito ng COSMOQUEST. So see you in our next episode of COSMOQUEST. So thank you mga ka-spacers. This is your ka-spacer and space commander Professor Jun Cajigal saying live long and prosper. Maraming salamat and don't forget to always keep your space. Goodbye and see you in our next episode of COSMOQUEST.
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
Choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone.